But we have a special guest, Simon Whitelocke, who's president of ITC Michigan, and he's back again. We've had him on the show a couple of times. I want to thank ITC for sponsoring this segment. Been a great partner now for a number of years, and hopefully we'll continue that on in 2023. So, Simon, let's kick things off by reminding our viewers who ITC is. There's some confusion out there. I realize you guys don't generate the power, but hey, you transmit the power, right?
That's right. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Matt, for having me. Appreciate it. Great to be here. Yes, ITC, we are a transmission-only company, electric transmission company. So we're focused on just the transmission part of the electric delivery system. So power system is really in three parts. First part is where it's generated. Then the electricity gets carried over high voltage lines, that's us. And then finally, it gets delivered to customers and businesses through the local distribution line. So we're in the middle piece of that overall electrical delivery system.
All right. And so you've been with us a number of times and talked about whether the U.S. is ready for renewable energy. It's almost a year since that contribution. Are we more ready now than we were then?
Well, that's a great question. I think we're still in a ever-changing system. We know that there's a lot happening in the world of electricity, where we have existing power plants are being retired. We have new power plants coming online, predominantly in the form of renewables. So for us, that's really where we focused our attention. Over the past year, a lot has changed in many senses, even though this business typically has moved somewhat slowly over the last 100 years. I think we're at a point in time where things are moving very quickly. And for us, one thing that did happen over the summer was that MISO, which is a regional organization that oversees the transmission planning process, they approved a suite of projects, 18 projects, in fact, over the Midwest region of the country. And these projects are very important because they really do help us with that transition from the existing generation to more renewables in the future. And part of that is there are going to be projects here in Michigan. But the good news is we have some projects, we have a plan, and now we can start working on that plan. It takes time. I think I've said before, it takes 7 to 10 years to build a transmission line from scratch. So we're getting going on those projects. And I think one of the things that we're anxious and excited about is the ability to really meet the needs that are coming because of the huge amount of renewables are looking to connect to our transmission system. So the sooner we can add this new transmission, the better off we're going to be.
So Simon, for the benefit of our listeners, tell us about MISO, what those letters stands for, and who are its members, and what does it do?
It's another good question. So MISO stands for Mid-Continent. It used to be Midwest, but now it's Mid-Continent because their footprint has grown. Mid-Continent Independent System Operator. And they are an RTO, another acronym, which means they're a regional transmission organization. So we like to think of them as a little bit like air traffic controllers, where they're monitoring the flow of electricity and then also whether enough electricity is being generated. And then they also administer markets on top of that for our region.
All right. Excuse me as I clear my throat again. I'm battling what Simon had last week. But we didn't get it from each other, though. So what do you see as the benefits for Michigan as a result of these long-range transmission plan investments?
Well, as I mentioned, we've got some new lines coming here in the state. It's about 110 miles of new 345 kV, so very high voltage, very big transmission lines are going to be constructed here in the state. And this is the first time that we've had new lines constructed that connect Michigan to somewhere up to another state or province. So one of these lines is going to connect from mid-Michigan and go all the way down into Indiana. And that's the first time in 50 years that will do something like that. So that's a pretty big deal. And as I mentioned before, as the landscape around energy keeps evolving, lines like this are going to be really important, because we're going to move to an era of being largely in control of the generation that we have, to moving to a paradigm where we're more dependent on Mother Nature. And as you are well aware, at night the sun's not shining and sometimes the wind isn't blowing, and we need to be able to move power if needed across state lines or beyond. And these projects will really help ensure that Michigan has the infrastructure, the backbone infrastructure, to be able to import power or export power when needed. So they're really going to help improve reliability, resiliency, hopefully lower generation costs through reducing congestion on the system. And then I think ultimately also be a benefit from an economic development perspective, because these just any strengthening of the grid, anything that helps access cleaner power, cheaper power, I think is good for the state from an economic development perspective too. So I'd say overall, improve reliability, resilience, reducing system congestion or generation costs, and helping to meet decarbonization goals that either the state or individual companies may have. So tremendous amount of benefits will come from these projects.
Okay, Simon, there's been some talk lately that I've heard about electricity shortages, although I've heard more about it in Europe than here, but there's some talk of it here too, as we continue to retire all these coal plants at such a rapid pace. I know ITC is not in the business of generating power, but in the big picture, what's the economic outlook for energy next year? What are you seeing and hearing as it relates to making sure businesses and residents will continue to have their energy needs met?
Well, it's a question that's really important. As you said, there was a lot of news earlier in the year. There were some, before the summer, there were forecasts or assessments that said, hey, things are getting tighter. We may have problems if certain things happen. Fortunately, knock on wood, nothing bad did happen in hindsight this summer. But as soon as we get through summer, then you have to look at to the winter. That's another peak demand season, and it's just going to keep going and going. And MISO's job as an RTO, one of the things that they do is to oversee and do those assessments and see, are we going to have enough generation? Are we going to come close to having an issue? And there are other layers of protection that we have on top of that. NERC does similar things, and the regions across the country. So we have a lot of folks looking at it, and we'll continue to look at that type of assessment as part of our own planning. And I think those are just important data points for us as we work to develop the system that we need longer term. I think it's clear that things are changing, and anytime you have change, you could have an increase in risk, and it's our job to really make sure that not only do we manage those risks in real time, but we plan for a future that minimizes those risks to the greatest extent possible. So we really work together with a variety of folks, with MISO, NERC, and others to make sure that we can maintain the highest level of reliability for our system. And we are proud of the reliable system that we have here in Michigan, and want to continue that.
Let's talk EVs. So I guess on your social media, you had something about having an EV day there in Novi. What was that all about?
Well, we had in conjunction with the National Drive Electric Week, we invited our employees to bring in their electric vehicles and hybrids to just show each other. So we did sort of a show and tell outside, and had a good number of vehicles. I was surprised to see how many employees have EVs. I was not aware, and it was a great way for them to be able to share their vehicles, help explain to their colleagues maybe the pros and cons of different vehicles, and ask questions. And I think for our company to get a better understanding of EVs ourselves. And I think EVs are definitely coming. There's no doubt that the number of the new models that are coming out, and I think adoption rates are going to go up, and it's up to us Another challenge that we face is, how our EV is going to affect the grid. And I think we're excited about the role that we can play in both facilitating the charging infrastructure, as well as making sure that we have a system in place that can handle increased electric use from charging, the change in distribution of the flows of electricity and all that. So it's pretty exciting, and it was a great event for us to have at our headquarters.
Yeah, Simon, you guys don't control this so-called last mile, which is, where people would charge their EVs if they charge them at home. But you certainly get involved with big projects, right? For major charging stations and, commercial buildings with lots of chargers all in one place, that kind of thing. What are you planning for in that regard?
Well, I think that's where we're really focused right now, is on larger scale charging applications. So if, for example, a fleet owner of a fleet of vehicles, electric vehicles, will need to charge those vehicles charge simultaneously. It's a significant demand of electricity. That's where you're getting into transmission level volume of electricity. So we would help facilitate that, or even public charging on a larger scale, as we think about moving from just passenger vehicles to maybe medium heavy duty vehicles that might need to charge. To do so in a relatively short period of time, they're going to need to charge. You're going to need a lot of electricity to do that. So that's where we are really putting, trying to wrap our heads around what can we do from a transmission perspective to make sure we have the infrastructure in place where it's needed and when it's needed.
Hey, it's not on the list of questions, but I know you've done it in years past. There's a transmission line runs along I-94, and you put up Christmas decorations. Are you doing that again this year?
I sure hope so. That's a good question. We get a lot of positive feedback about that. It's great for us to be able to utilize some of our towers and do some decorations at this time of the year. But it makes me feel good too every time I drive by and see some of those towers lit up.
So Simon, I wanted to ask you personally if you've considered getting an EV, or if you have one yet.
I actually have one on order. I'll keep you in suspense as to which one it is, but I have an order, and I'm patiently waiting for my order to come in.
Yeah, you may be waiting a while on that. There's still supply chain issues and whatnot. And of course, EVs are in great demand right now, surprisingly, but because a lot of people don't want to spend the extra money, but on the other hand, they think it's good for the environment, probably something they should do, right?
Well, I drove one, and it was I was hook, line, and sinker. So exciting! The acceleration, the quietness, the performance. It was everything I could have hoped for and more. So I'm really excited to join the EV ranks myself. Okay.
And if folks want to find out more about ITC Michigan, how do they do that?
ITC-Holdings.com.